What's up, guys? Sparring Cat, and in today's Battle Cats video, I'm ranking meat shields on a tier list from D tier to S tier. And I did a video like this last October, but I've added a few units, and I wanted to update some of my rankings. So I'll also leave that in the cards you'll see in the upper right corner. And just getting into this list, we have Manic Mohawk Cat, and I'm gonna put him in B tier. He's a very solid generalist meat shield, but he doesn't really have a niche. He isn't powerful in terms of health or damage or anything like that, but very fast recharge speed, fast movement speed, 75 cents, disposable. He's just a classic meat shield, but on a lot of stages, he ends up not being used because of specialist meat shields, which are good against one or more traits, or they have a special ability like survive a lethal strike or something like that. And Manic Mohawk does not have that, but he's still a very reliable meat shield in terms of what you could put him in and the fact that he's one of the cheapest in the game. And moving on is going to be Catalyte. And Catalyte, I'm going to put Catalyte in A tier. Catalyte is very powerful in terms of being good against aliens. So very good meat shield against them, spammable and everything. And there's some stages, especially Advent stages, where he really shines. And this is because of his spammability, and especially if you give him his research speed ups, his research talents and everything. So make sure to, bring him in with a combo or two. If you don't, he's still fine, but I would recommend that because of his recharge. It's a bit longer than some other meat shields, but he's pretty cheap, and for his stats, he is resistant against aliens, so that's very good. And he's an A tier, maybe even an S tier on some people's lists, but I'll leave him in A tier. I might adjust it. Moving on, we have Wallcat right here, and I'm just going to get his other buddies as well. I honestly think they're all S tier. I did not make an SS tier, so I might just do that right now. Add a row above. And new. Perfect. And right there, crazed eraser will go. And there really are not many words that could describe the erasers except for amazing. And this is because they have very high base health. The crazed eraser specifically good speed, and on top of that, very spammable, very affordable, and they are the best set of generalist meat shields in the game. There are niche meat shields that could do better, like a ramen cat against angels, but in terms of just bringing it into a default loadout and the fact that he's the second unit in the entire game you get, incredible. Gotta drink some water. But the erasers are great, and there'll be more units to join the S tier, but nobody's gonna touch SS. I could have also named it Manic Eraser if I wanted to, but he is getting honored in that tier. And moving on is Gato Amigo. I'm gonna put him in C. And he's pretty useful in 4-star stages, especially earlier on the game. But when you get the little cats, that definitely outclasses him. Even even fights units like Sumo, other purchasable specials. And then, units like Wushu, Shaigong, Wushu and Shaigong are the same. But, you have Shaigong, you have Ramen, you have these units that also outclass him. So it's really tough for Gato Amigo. He's just in a very crowded field of units, and he doesn't really come on top. He does have Surge Immunity if you get his talents, so that gives him a big niche. If you get that, then he might be a B or even an A tier if you really fight Surge enemies. But I would say if you fully talent him, he could be a B. If you don't talent him, he'll be a C. So you know what? I'll move him to a B behind Manic Macho Cat and behind Manic Mohawk Cat, and I'd recommend you to get his talents if you want to use them. Jiangxi. So Jiangxi is going to be an A up there. He's going to be right with Catalyte, and the reason he's not an S is because he's too expensive, but he's very powerful. Also, he could use a little bit more movement speed, but he's got very good DPS for being a meat shield. He has a guaranteed chance of surviving a lethal strike, So that's very good. But yeah, his recharge and his price are two things that hold him back a little bit. You can't always bring him in a normal stage because of how much he costs, but he's very good in a lot of stages. I'd also recommend for you to use him in 4-star stages, especially earlier in the game, because he has that guaranteed survivability. So it's like you're getting two meat shields in one. But do keep in mind the price and the amount of money they get dropped. So yeah, keep that all in mind. But I think he's a powerful meat shield, and he does a good job getting getting rid of peons that are in front of him. So also keep that in mind. He has good offense for being a meat shield. Moving on to Kyuubi Cat, I think that's how you say it. Also going to be an A tier. Quite good because similarly to Jiangxi, it is able to survive a lethal strike, and it's also cheaper. So both really good, but not as many stats, not as high in stats as Jiangxi. So same tier, but another really good option you could bring in, especially for 4-star stages, as Kyuubi is cheaper, but also not a guaranteed survive and lower base stats. Keep that all in mind, though. Another great meat shield. Moving on is Lil Mohawk, and Lil Mohawk is going to be in a B plus with Crazed Mohawk, and the reason with Manic Mohawk, and the reason why is because of the fact it's the cheapest meat shield in the game at 45 cents. So with that little bit of money you're saving every time you spam them, every minute or two you could afford another big unit, and that is huge in some stages. And sometimes it's enough to let you get that can out or that Paris cat out or something that you need to move past the enemies or stalemate the enemies until you can get someone else. So that 30 cents every second or two does help out, even though it seems redundant. After a minute or two, you've saved a couple thousand cents. So keep that in mind. Gonna put them in B. Not as powerful in terms of speed and stuff like that, but still a great meat shield due to the fact that it's cheap. Not quite as good as the ones in A tier because, like the normal Manic Mohawk cat, the stats aren't super high, but at the same time, it's pretty good in terms of being expendable and being able to get it out in a pinch. Green Shell, I just ranked him in my last video. I'm gonna give him an A minus. I think he is good at what he does, and he just rolls over enemies and stops them in their tracks for a little bit. But if he gets killed, you have to wait a long time for him to come back out, and yeah, he doesn't deal a lot of damage or anything. He just stands still. He's like a Dolphina. I mean, not a Dolphina, like an alien dolphin from Cats of the Cosmos. But yeah, I'm gonna leave him in A minus. Not a whole lot to say. He's immune to a lot of different things, so that's good. Status effects, he's immune to a lot of them, and he has a lot of health. But that's about it. He's kind of one-dimensional. I do like him though personally, and he's helped me. But yeah, I mean, he just stalls. He's a little less like a meat shield, more of just a shield. All right, Matador Cat is. I'm not a big fan of her. I'm going to give her a C. Not very reliable in terms of her dodge against reds, but if you do get her true form and talent her and everything, then she is more viable. I do think, however, not my first or second or even my fifth pick against red enemies. I've never used her. I don't have her true form or anything. But if you want to make the investments, go ahead. Moving on is going to be normal Macho Cat, and yeah, he'll get a B as well. Same thing as the other two, cheap and everything. You send him out, and you know what you're getting. You're just getting the guy who's going to tank a hit and die, and you send another one out for 75 cents. Not going to elaborate on that too much since he follows the footprints of the other two. Next, we have Modern Cat, and personally, I love Modern Cat. I'm going to give Modern Cat an A, and Modern Cat is a great niche shield against relics and metal enemies, so good against two different niches. Has a ton of health against each of them, and is somewhat spammable and everything. Pretty cheap for what it does, and it does a great job at keeping those two traits in order. It could tank a lot of damage, and it's similar to Cone Cat. Just Cone Cat is good against other traits, but I'll get to Cone Cat in a little bit. But yeah, I think Modern Cat, you might even be able to put him up here. And yeah, a lot of people say Cone Cat's better, but I like both of them a lot. So I'll leave him up in the high A. But just, I thought I put Cone Cat on this list. I swear I did. I just added these 3 again. I did before, it didn't take, but here we are again. And here's No, and I'm going to put her in an A tier. And the reason she's not going to be an S tier is because of another unit that I just added back onto this list, which is Lil Gaio, and he outclasses her. But focusing on her, she does pretty well against black enemies, but her lowish base stats do make it a little more difficult for her to face off against other units and to also be used in generalist lineups. So that does deduct points from her. She also has a lot of range for a Meatshield, sitting in at 190 range. So, sits back and kind of brings enemies closer. But if you're going to use her against black enemies, Bomber Cat has more range than her and everything like that. So you could use that properly. Pizza Cat has more range than her. You could use him properly, and so on and so forth. But do keep that in mind. 190 range is a lot of range for a Meatshield, and she does bring in enemies closer to her than sometimes comfortable. Ramen Cat is gonna go in S tier. I think he makes it to S tier. He's used by a ton of people, and for good reason, because if you pair him with a recharge combo, he's very efficient. With the research combos and everything, you could put him in, you send him out every few seconds, and he's great and amazing against his own niche. So not only a good generalist, but very powerful specialist as well, as he has 6-digit health against them and everything. So against angels. So keep that in mind. Very, 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 very powerful against his own niche, and reliable in generalist usage. Sumo Cat. I don't know. I actually don't know. I want to say, yeah. All right, I'll give him like an 80 at best. Sumo Cat is not very good, and the problem is he's expensive, and his stats just don't keep up throughout the game. But in beginning game, he's very usable because of 4-star stages. When you first start that, you're not going to have a lot of good Meatshields in that category, since you're not going to be using a racer or a normal cat. So that's good and everything, but he does fall off pretty hard. You could get him talented up if you want to keep him viable, but it's an investment, so keep that in mind. I do think there's better Meatshields, but for all the credit he gets, I don't think he's that good. Moving on to Shygon Cat. This is Wushu, but it is Shygon. And I personally want to put him in S tier. He's an average generalist. I don't know if I'd recommend him even. So that's not where his strength is. His strength is in the fact that he's an incredibly powerful zombie defender, and there really isn't another Meatshield that could do what he does against zombies. So he owns an entire trait, and other units like No and stuff, they don't own a trait. Future Cat is very good, but he doesn't own anti-relic tanking. He's one of the 2 or 3 great ones, but he doesn't own it. Shygon owns that niche, so I think that gives him S tier. Moving on to Madame de Savannah, I just added him for fun. D tier, really bad in terms of actual practical usage and cost 600 cents. So I'd recommend you guys to just ditch him from your lineup and buy Can for 75 more cents. Because despite having good base stats, once you get throughout the game, you'll realize that the unreliable survive chance isn't good enough to warrant its usage. If it was good against a trait, then it might be a really good Meatshield. If it was resistant to something, it'd have a ton of health. But this costs 600 cents, and it only has decent stats. Overpriced and not overpowered. Aforementioned earlier is Baby Guile, and I'm going to put him right over No. And Guile is very powerful against black enemies. You know what? I'm actually going to put him up to an A+. Very, very powerful against his niche, and similar to Shygon in terms of being an anti-black, but Shygon against zombies also has zombie kill and everything, so another useful one. Guy just has a ton of health, and he's a good Meatshield. Really not a lot of fault for him. He's just kind of slow, he waddles over and he doesn't always get to the enemy in time, so especially if you're playing in restriction stages or whatever, it takes a couple seconds for the restriction sign to go away, so as they approach, you're desperately spamming him, and he doesn't come out. And I definitely didn't just fight Black Okame the other day, and that's definitely not why I'm saying that, but, he's a little limited by the very slow movement speed and everything, but other than that, he's great. And I think the movement speed is the only thing that stops him from being an S tier. And last but not least is Concat, and I'll put him in S because he's one of the two Colossus Meatshields. He's good against relics, and he's good against AKU, so that really gives him 3 usages instead of 2 like Modern Cat. And on top of that, he's incredibly powerful against those 3 traits, and he does own endgame, so keep that in mind. Very good cat, and if you're looking for where he is in the advents, he'll be under Maze Cat, so make sure to go after him. But this is my Meatshield ranking tier list. I don't know if I got every single one that you guys were thinking of, but this is my ultimate list. When the worst one on this list is Madame de Savannah, and best is going to be my lovely king, Manic Eraser Cat, not Crazed. He's better than Crazed, he's Manic. But this is my tier list. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And please leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. I'll read through them, and I'll respond back to you as necessary. Just remember to keep it civil. That's my only request. But anyways, Spartan Cat signing off, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.